The Israeli government voting to approve an historic deal to end the conflict in Gaza. And joining us right now is Dan Senor. He's the former foreign policy advisor to the George W. Bush administration. He's co-author of The Genius of Israel and Startup Nation and host of the podcast Call Me Back. This is quite a moment that we are in right now. And the question is it going to be lasting?
I don't know if it will be lasting, but I think I think for the near term and medium term, we are going to get real quiet. Israel's going to get its hostages back. The Palestinians will hopefully have an entity running Gaza that is not Hamas. And the threat from Hamas will be, at best, completely removed. And I think, at a minimum, seriously deterred and weakened for a long time.
So you said for the near term or the midterm. What does that mean to you from a timing perspective? Well, as we try to create stability in the Middle East and try to actually create a lasting peace?
Look, I think what we're going to see. Look, I will give you my optimistic scenario. Mm-hmm. My optimistic scenario is the threat from Hamas is basically gone for years. Arab countries, the Emiratis, the Egyptians, maybe others come in to help as part of the stabilization force secure Gaza. So the IDF doesn't have to do it, yet the IDF remains in sort of a buffer area to provide basic security, so you can't have another October 7th-like attack. And then there is this development of an alternative to Hamas, an alternative to the Palestinian Authority that is a technocratic class of Palestinians that can actually run civilian affairs in Gaza so that Israel doesn't have to do it and Hamas is not doing that. If that all happens in the direction I'm characterizing here, describing here, I think we could be on a path towards normalization with Saudi Arabia within the next 18 to 24 months. And if that happens, I think you get real stability in the region, because if Saudi Arabia normalizes with Israel, the Arab-Israeli conflict is basically over.
Two other questions. The economic one, which is how does Gaza ultimately get funded?
Yeah.
Rebuilding there.
I think you're going to see now a number of the Arab states, the Emiratis, maybe the Saudis, certainly Qatar is talking about it, coming in and funding major reconstruction efforts. And I think you'll see from elsewhere within the international community, a lot of funding coming in. I don't think funding is going to be a problem.
Okay, let me ask you a different question.
I think an alternative Palestinian leadership is going to be interesting to see how that develops, but I don't think funding will be
Where do you think this leaves Israel on the global stage? Benjamin Netanyahu was here at the UN. Half of the countries literally walked out on him.
Yeah.
We have a potential next mayor of New York City making comments literally on the anniversary.
Calling Israel a genocidal state.
Yes.
On the anniversary of October 7th.
And so my question to you is, from a reputation perspective for Israel, for Jewish people around the world, what do you think happens next?
Yeah, so I think it's important. It's a very important question. I get this question a lot from Jewish communities. I think it's important to draw a distinction from the day-to-day war fighting. The day-to-day war fighting, like we've seen over the last 2 years, is what is shaping the minds of people who are seeing these images that I think are driving that phenomenon that you're describing on their TikTok screens and on their television screens. I think that's going to go way down now over the next few years, because there just won't be the kind of war fighting we've seen over the last couple of years. And I think a lot of those images have been distorted. A lot of them have been manipulated. So it's unfair to Israel. But the reality is that it affects public opinion in the way you're describing. Now, if you get away from the day-to-day war fighting, and then you ask yourself, okay, Israel has now basically removed the threat from Hamas. It has completely eliminated the threat from Iran, which was its biggest threat.
With the help with the what you would have to say was courageous help from the United States.
Indispensable.
And the Doha, what happened in Doha, with all these things were done with great risk to both Netanyahu and Trump.
I thought they were.
But they didn't second-guess themselves. They didn't think about public opinion, all the stuff that we're wringing our hands about right now. And that's why we're in this position right now.
The partnership between Trump and Netanyahu, specifically on the operation in Iran, and this most recent piece still happened in part because
not succumbing to the public pressure and to the PR that we're talking about right now.
So the Trump backing Netanyahu and backing the Israeli government on going into Gaza City, which I think put extraordinary pressure on Hamas, which made them realize they needed to do a deal. So I think the partnership between the U.S. and Israel was
instead of putting governor. The point in the journal piece that I gave you was that instead of
gave me a signed reading.
I did give you a signed reading.
I agree with you.
Do you agree with the piece?
Totally.
That the Biden administration coddled the opposition to Israel and tried to put governors on Israel.
I think what the Biden administration's look, they did some things right after October 7th. I have to say that, but their major setback was joining the pressure campaign on Israel, which emboldened Hamas. Because at key points in negotiations, Hamas believed that the pressure was mounting on Israel.
Right. The hand-wringing.
But I just want to come back to something you asked about, Andrew. If you get out of this war right now, the last 2 years, Hamas is gone as a threat. Iran is gone as a threat. The proxy system that Iran had been building throughout the region has been taken out by Israel, Hezbollah, and other proxies. So Israel today is effectively the hegemon in the Middle East. Israel is now the most important geopolitical power in the Middle East. And it is demonstrated that it could take on a seven-front war and come out standing stronger. And I think geopolitically, economically, it's in a much bigger position. And I'll say one other point on the economic issue and whether or not Israel will be isolated. There are two laboratories for the future of warfare today in the world, Ukraine and Israel. You want to understand where the future of warfare is going? It's Ukraine and Israel. Except Israel has this incredible tech ecosystem. There's something like close to 400 defense tech startups in Israel today. There were like 150, 160 of them before the war. And this is in drone warfare, anti-drone warfare, various AI-related defense capabilities. The whole world, or at least most Western governments, certainly in Europe and elsewhere, are now increasing their defense budgets. They want to do business with those innovators. They're on the cutting edge of defense technologies. And I think there's been a lot of yelling and screaming over the last 2 years about Israel from many of these countries, specifically in Europe. I think they're going to be rushing now to figure out how to be doing business with the Israeli tech ecosystem and specifically the Israeli defense.
Why isn't it unequivocally a positive that now what you just described as the hegemon in the Middle East is a Western-style free democracy? That this is exactly the outcome that we all should have been hoping for.
And as Alexander Haig once said, Israel is an unsinkable battleship, an unsinkable aircraft carrier.
Are you happy?
Yes, in the heart of a region that we, the United States, cares about. So we now have this resource in the Middle East that's our ally. It's looking out for our interests, which means the U.S. can pull back a little bit because we have this partner in the region, which, as I said and you said, is much stronger today.
Well, I just think it's unequivocally positive.
Yeah.
What
happens now to Bibi Netanyahu?
He's in a better position.
He's got to make a decision. Israel has to go to elections by October of 26. So now we're just in this question of whether he goes for elections soonish, taking the win off the deal, taking the positive momentum off this deal and going to elections, or does he wait a few months? But either way, sometime between, call it January and spring, Israel's going to be going to elections.
Okay.
I think he's in a stronger political position today than he was, months ago. But what Israel's about to go through politically is completely untested. Israel has now fought the longest war in its history. October 7th is this inflection point for the country, and it happened under his watch. So this is like Golda Meir, after the 1973 Yom Kippur War, complete embarrassment. Israel completely caught off guard. It's the closest comparison to October 7th. It was a 19-day war. This was a 2-year war. The level of casualties, the wear and tear on society. So what the prime minister that was in charge now going for re-election, this is completely untested. That said, as I mentioned earlier, under his leadership, Iran is no longer a threat. As I said, this proxy system is now gone. Israel's economy, I think, is going to come out even stronger from this, believe it or not. So I think he's got an important story to tell that he could run on. And I think that there is the gravity of October 7th happened on his watch. And this is untested of an incumbent running for re-election.
You think Trump and Netanyahu both had a long-term strategy that would result in this outcome? Because you look at each disparate event, Fordo bombing, you look at them in a vacuum, each one of them looked like it could have been almost not necessarily seat of the pants, but you didn't know how it was going to turn out. There was great risk.
It did not look like there was coordination between them.
It didn't look like any of that. And as it turns out, it almost looks like was it three-dimensional chess?
I think there's a tendency in the press to cover the minute-to-minute. Trump had a tough phone call with Netanyahu this morning, breaking. It was, he yelled at him. And we cover the minute-to-minute about various tensions. They disagree on this, they disagree on that. When you take a step back, you see
what they agree on,
one mode of operation over the last 2 years. What is that mode of operation is?
All the proxies.
Good cop, bad cop. That basically let Israel do what it needs to do. Trump giving them support publicly, and then so you take, for instance, the Gaza deal. I mean, this deal that we just was just announced. When Israel announced it was going into Gaza City, and it was hugely divisive, and Europe, as Andrew said, is going crazy and going to the UN saying they can't do this. And even there was division within Israeli society about whether or not Israel should go into Gaza City. And Trump is saying he should do it. He should do it. We're backing him. And that sent a message to Hamas and those supporting Hamas that, wait a minute, the U.S. is not going to rein Israel in. We're used to the U.S. jumping in and pulling Israel back. So the U.S. is giving them unconditional support.
What's the biggest threat you see, either midterm or long term, with this? Is it change in administrations, change in policies on these issues? Do you think it's...
Yeah, I'll tell you, my biggest concern today is a major change in the historical nature of the U.S.-Israel relationship. There's a discussion going on in the U.S. today that alarms me about it's a problem. I will just say this analytically. It's a problem that's more it's escalating on the left, more on the political right. So I do worry about a future administration, not just a Democrat administration, but like a hard left progressive administration. For instance, it was just a few weeks ago in the Senate voted on a resolution to cut off arms sales to Israel.
Joe Biden supported Israel.
Right, and so was Joe Biden the last of a generation in the Democratic Party? Because when that vote came up, in the U.S. Senate, over half of the Senate Democrats voted to cut off arms, and those are some Senate Democrats who used to be stalwart supporters of Israel. So if those are the kinds of people and that worldview that populates a future administration, that to me, from the U.S.-Israel relationships perspective, is scary. It's alarming. I can't emphasize enough the degree to which Israel depends on the U.S., but also the U.S. depends on Israel. We get more out of this relationship than one could argue. We get more out of this relationship as Americans than Israel does because of the security presence that Israel gives us in the region. And so if there's suddenly a view towards abandoning that, that worries me.